The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit one's life? Or what can one give in exchange for one's life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to their conduct. The Gospel of the Lord. While we have been enjoying rather delightful late summer weather here in South Bend, many of us have been transfixed with the path of Hurricane Irene up the east coast of the United States. For one, because it's such an important population center, and also because many of us have friends or relatives who live there, as I do. There's something extraordinary about these natural events, for they remind us that in the end, we're really not in control of our circumstances. I know a number of people who have experienced major earthquakes, and they say what's overwhelming about it is it comes out of the blue, and even though it only lasts for seconds, it seems like minutes. But most of all, the ground that we stand on, that we take for granted, is no longer so reliable. And therefore, all kinds of questions about our very survival are in the air. And even though with a hurricane there's a lot of time for preparation, there's still a sense that some impending gloom is coming in our direction. I was once in the eye of a hurricane. It's an extraordinary thing. You have tempestuous storms, wind and rain, and then all of a sudden you have sunshine and utter stillness. But you know it won't last forever, for at the other side of the eye is more storm. And yet the eye is a reminder that we hope that that's what most of our life is like, that storms are only occasional events, that we can have an ordinary existence that's full of its own degree of happiness and contentment. And yet, as most of us grow into adulthood, we recognize that the cross, that sacrifice and pain, are an inevitable part of life in this world. We are creatures of flesh and blood, and we go through the stages of life, and we are dependent upon things and people for our own sufficiencies. For example, so many in a difficult economic environment do not know that they will have their job on the morrow, or when they graduate from a fine institution like this one, that they will get a reward for all the hard work that led to their degree. And as we see that some struggle, we recognize that we could, without a degree of good fortune, be in their situation as well. We know as we go through the life cycle that we're subject to disease and misfortune, auto accidents and falls and so on. Whether in our own life or in the life of another, there's nothing more terrifying than having a body, a set of tests that the doctor assigned, and then waiting for the diagnosis. It could be something serious, and we need to steel ourselves for that possibility. And even when it comes to our own offspring or those entrusted to our care, when they are sick or in a difficult circumstance in life, we worry about their well-being. Some suffer from chronic depression, where life always looks somewhat bleak. Others discover that they're addicted to one kind of substance or another. Some are in war-torn lands, or as we will soon remember on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, out of the blue, terrorist attacks, and we wonder how much in control of our national destiny we really are. There's only so much we can do to prevent some degree of suffering and pain in this world. And so the real question is, how will we face it? With hope and confidence, or with a kind of sense of being overwhelmed? In the dialogue we have in the gospel today between Peter and Jesus, Jesus is trying to instruct his disciples about his messianic path. He will have to be arrested, suffer, die on the cross before victory can be won through the power of his resurrection. There is no other way for him to fulfill his destiny, his providential destiny. And he has to submit to that in the fullness of his freedom. And when Peter says, well, that's not the right route for you, that's not why I've given myself over to you, he has to chide him, because Peter himself will someday have to follow the example of his Lord and Master. To be in a world where some degree of sacrifice is required, to carry our cross is one of the central tenets of Christian life in the world. There is no such thing as cheap grace. Grace is always costly. In the banner behind me, you see the emblem of the Congregation of Holy Cross, the cross and anchor. And usually it appears with the Latin phrase, Ave crux spes unica, behold the cross, our only hope. For the Christian, no degree of pain, of suffering, or disappointment can prevent us from bringing into our lives and sustaining ourselves with a message of hope, of promise, and possibility that is the ultimate victory that Jesus won with his resurrection. The cross is our only hope. It is our path to victory, as it was for Jesus. And so, as we face the travails and challenges of life, let us be comforted that in the end, Jesus Christ, in his victory over sin and death, will bring all things to fulfillment.